Okay, we're going to be putting together a turntable and roundhouse. I happen to have a Walthers Cornerstone Series N-scale modern 130-foot turntable right here. This is not the most current turntable out there. There's a DCC version that comes in a blue box, but this is an older version. It's still automatically reversible, so that's a good thing, and it should work just fine for what I'm going to be doing. Also, a 3-stall Roundhouse edition. I also have the main one as well. It's going to have 18 bays in it, so it's going to be a fairly large roundhouse and turntable setup. So what I'm starting off with here is I've got a 4-foot square piece of plywood, 1/2-inch plywood. It's got a sanded top to it, and I'm going to be measuring out where I'm going to place this turntable at. Lay out all the pieces over here. These are all the bases for the bays of the roundhouse. Lay them all out, measure them, make my marks of where it's going to go, and then start cutting and building. The overall piece is going to be roughly about 58 inches wide, so this one piece of 4x4 is not going to cut it, but I only need the strength of where the turntable and everything else is going to go all in one piece, and so that's where this 4-foot square piece will come in. So let's get started. Okay, I laid out my plan, my template. I kind of have roughly where I want to place it on this piece of wood. As you can see, this is kind of the plan that I have. My printer needs a little bit of a cleaning, but anyway, this is the wall over here on this side, and this will be the front where people walk into the room and will see this immediately. Turntable go here, of course, roundhouse all around there, and I have a track coming in from the side and a couple spurs going over to the side. One of them will be my programming track, and the other one just sort of a static display. One thing to note is this template, even though it says it's 9 inches and 15/16 wide hole is what I have to cut. In the space between these two lines is 1/8 of an inch too short. This template is too small, according to what their instructions say. So you can't really use the template. You can kind of use it for the roundhouse side, where to mark those things off, because it's pretty close on there. But for drilling your hole out in your plywood or your foam, your best bet is to cut it a little bit small and then trim around the outsides, maybe with a sander or more jigsaw action, depending on how small you made it. Basically, this doesn't really need to be perfect, because on top of this, I'm going to put a 1/2-inch piece of foam on here, because the pits inside the roundhouse sink down 1/8 of an inch. So if I was going to just put this right onto the wood, I'd have to put shims underneath all of this to raise it up. So I'd probably have to put some sort of cork underneath there and everything else, and it's just more work than necessary than if I just cut out sections of foam and lay it all down in there, and it'll be nice and flush, and I won't have to worry about it. The most important thing is to keep your turntable level on all sides. It cannot be shifting one way or another, otherwise your turntable doesn't turn, and nobody wants that. So I'm going to get down to making my marks and break out a jigsaw and cut out my hole. Okay, the template tells you you need to drill out a 7/32 inch hole where these pieces right here are going to fit down into the side of the hole. If you're going to flush mount this right to a piece of wood, you need to do this. If you're putting it into foam, you can just push it down into the foam. It should push the foam out of the way so it will fit in there snugly, or you can cut out the sections itself. But what basically this is going to do is you're going to have screws and a plate that mount to the bottom of this board and screw into these holes. And they call them bosses. So it will squeeze this template, or it'll squeeze this turntable down up against the board. Now, if you're going to do that and follow the template, don't cut out your center template piece until you've drilled your holes. Why? Well, when you cut this hole out, you can't get your drill bit in along the edge here because it's too narrow. So what I did was I took a hacksaw, marked where I had my bosses going to be at, and cut notches into the sides. And then I took my drill bit and rounded it out a little bit. And I kept working and working around it, more jigsaw, make some more notches until it got to fit. Also used a finishing sander to sand down the edges and get any of those spots that were not completely round, and made it fit. And as you can see, it's going to go in, find the notch, this marking notch, where the optical sensor is at, drop it in, and press to fit, so it's nice and flush all the way around. Now, at this point in my process, I have not finished this tabletop and mounted it to any framework. I just wanted to cut the hole and to know exactly where it was going to be, and then cut the rest of the wood to fit my frame. Once this was cut, I knew roughly how far I needed to have on either side to go all the way out to the end of the roundhouse. And now I'm ready to start cutting this wood to fit a frame. So that's my next step. Okay, as you can see, I've been making my framework. I'm using 1x4s to make my frame. Matches the Helix framework. Got my hole set up, and I'm putting a brace about 1.5 inches away from this hole, and I've shifted the framework over a little bit, so it's one 2x4 width over here on the side, because there's a 2x4 that's mounted on the wall, and so this top is going to go all the way to the wall, so it'll be laying over the top of this 2x4, so I have a spacer in here, so when I'm screwing this in, I've pre-drilled the holes, and I'm using number 8 1.5 inch screws, and I've only got 3 more screws to go, and I've got some extra room over here for more board later. That's all I'm doing at the moment. I pre-drilled all these holes. Okay, on some of this wood I recycled from an older layout that I had a while back. It's still got a bunch of glue and foam stuck to one side of it. That's now going to be on the bottom, so it's not actually flush with the top. Keep a nice straight surface. Okay, I took my drill and countersunk some holes where I'm going to put some screws, number 8 1-inch screws, and put them all the way around the edges in strategic, evenly spaced places, and then drilled it out with a 5/64 inch drill bit, and then All you gotta do is screw in your screws. And why do you countersink? So that the screw heads are flush with the top, especially if this is going to be your working surface for your model. If you're going to put foam on top of it, you probably don't really have to countersink, but it sure helps. Keeps it nice and flush and doesn't give you any bumps or rises when you glue that foam down. As you come into the room, you'll see first thing is this turntable and roundhouse. That'll be right there. As you can see, it's mounted right up against the wall. There's a little bit of gap over here against the wall, but that's okay. The 2x4 is a little not flush, but it'll hold just fine. I just have a temporary leg right here, and it's clamped on to the helix down there. No screws holding it up at the moment. Just trying to get a good look at how it's going to kind of look like. Well, Mancavians, if you like what you saw here today, click subscribe or click on the links down below and follow me on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. And as always, happy model railroading and stay off the tracks.